Back again, this time with Secret of the Sea by Paula Sheridan. I read this for Autumn Amour, which is a romance event hosted by the Bookish Bryants, and I'll have a link to their channel down below in my description. So I am not a romance reader, but I used to be when I was a teen and in my 20s. But at some point I lost interest in the genre and I put away all of my favorite ones into storage, and I really haven't thought of them too much since then. However, since the Bryants decided to host this event, I decided to pull all my old romance novels out and choose a handful to read for Autumn Amour. So this one was published in 1979, and I didn't really have too much memory surrounding this book. I couldn't really remember what it was about until I started to read it, at which point I did finally get some vague impressions about what was coming in the book. It's not very long at all. It's only 125 pages. So I read it one night when I couldn't sleep. And I did record some footage of me talking about the book, which I'll see about interweaving a little bit of that into this video as we go here.
I'm actually in the middle of a Star Trek book, but I thought I would not go back to that one and pick up one of my Autumn Amour books instead. This one is super tiny. It's like I should be able to finish this in one sitting. It's called Secret of the Sea by Paula Sheridan. Hi, kitty kitty. Ninja came to visit. Hi, baby kitty. You want to be in the video too? Where's my boy? Where's my cool baby? Oh, precious. So anyways, I thought I would read that book and try another little vlog and see how it goes for me. So eat a baby. Taste the baby kitty. Hi, baby kitty. That's a ninja. Wow, this is the best view of him I've ever been able to get on camera, I think. Hi, baby kitty. What you doing? Yeah, I can't believe you looked at the camera. Yeah. Eat a baby. Look at this cute little face. Oh, do a close up. I can't believe he's cooperating. He never gets in front of the camera like that.
So in the beginning, we start with Lindsay, who is a 19-year-old girl who has recently graduated from school. She's still living at home with her folks.
I'm about 20 pages in, and I'm having no memories of reading this book at all. I thought for sure once I started reading, like I would start being able to maybe picture myself reading it, or maybe even recall some of the thoughts I had while I was reading it, but nothing. It's just a complete blank. And I'm also surprised that the female protagonist is only 19. On the cover, this looks like a pair of adults who are around 30-ish. You know, maybe just under or maybe just over. But yeah, she's 19 years old. So I'm a bit shocked. So yeah, I'm interested to see where this goes. And also if at any point anything triggers my memory.
And she has a best friend who is away with her parents on a cruise. And she gets a letter from her friend talking about this boy that she's in love with. His name is Nicky. And how she expects him to ask her to marry him. And then a few days later, Irina, that's the best friend's name, Irina's family comes home early from their cruise. And she finds out that her best friend has killed herself by throwing herself overboard during this cruise. The mother tells Lindsay that Irina was rejected by the boy that she was in love with and decided that she couldn't go on without him. So Lindsay is extremely upset by this, which brings me to my first problem with this book, which was Lindsay's parents. Lindsay is very upset by this situation, and as the days go by, she just feels more and more like she wants to get away. She just feels like everything is reminding her of her friend, and she can't get her friend out of her mind. So she thinks the best thing for her to do would be to move to another town that's nearby and find a job and just live on her own away from everybody and work for a while. And when she tells her mother this, the first thing her mother says is, She thinks it's fortunate that the friendship did not continue, because if the friendship had gone on, Lindsay would have ended up being dissatisfied with what she had, because Irina's parents were very rich and Lindsay's parents aren't. And that was really insensitive. The mother just had absolutely no comprehension whatsoever about the type of grief that this poor girl is in. She has no understanding of it whatsoever. In fact, the parents seem really, really insensitive and cold about it to me. Then the next thing is that when she tells her mother that she wants to move away from home and find a job and work, the mother says, "Well, we'll talk about that later." Wouldn't you be a legal adult at the age of 18? I don't know that that would have been terribly different in the UK. I can't imagine it would be. But maybe it is. Who knows? Maybe she wasn't. I mean, she graduated from school. She's done with school. I would think you're a legal adult at this point. But anyway, so I didn't care for that either, that the parents just seemed controlling. But she does end up finding a job. She is going to be a companion, a live-in companion for this very rich widow who is in her very late 30s. The implication is that she's 38 or 39, and her husband has been gone a year. So she moves to the city and moves in with Mrs. Stansby, that's the name of the widow, and she becomes very comfortable there, and she makes a few friends around town. She paints, and she feels like she's gone as far as she can with her painting on her own, and she would like to find a painting instructor. So she does find an instructor for her painting, and she makes friends with a local boy in town and the boy's aunt. She goes to their house regularly to visit them. And the whole book goes along, and there's no sign of romance whatsoever. I'm thinking the boy, I believe his name is Jeff. I'm thinking that Jeff has got to be the romantic interest because they're the same age. But there's never any indication of that. And then her painting instructor is 40 years old, and turns out he was Mrs. Stansby's husband's best friend. And that's it. Those are the only two men in the story.
Okay, page 76. And we have now met somebody who knew Irina on the ship. And it is Lindsay's painting instructor. But he seems too old to have been the one that she fell in love with. Also, his name is Charles. So Nikki would be a pretty far stretch from Charles. So I don't know. We'll see where that goes. Book, I'm thinking that maybe Irina didn't die. I'm thinking that maybe she purposely made everybody think she was dead so that she could go off with this Nikki, or go off to find this Nikki. So I feel like either I'm getting that impression because I've read this book before, and even though I don't actually remember reading it, I do remember certain things about it. Maybe that's why I'm feeling that way. But or maybe I'm just coming up with that on my own. I don't know. But I feel like nothing is happening in this book. So I almost feel like it's something dramatic is going to be happening at the ending. So yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll see if Irina is really dead
in the story. So we go along and nothing happens. Nothing happens. And keep in mind, the book is only 125 pages long. So right about a page, I can't remember what it was, maybe 110-ish, something finally happens. Somebody breaks into Mrs. Stansby's house and slices up this portrait that she has of him hanging in her study. And he leaves a letter claiming that her husband was the father of his wife's child. And he's really angry about it. And for some reason is blaming Mrs. Stansby, which doesn't really make sense. But so Mrs. Stansby is taken away to the hospital because she's had this shock and all of this business. And so since there's really nothing for Lindsay to do, she is visiting with Charles, who is the painting instructor. And in the last 20 pages of the book, there's only 20 pages of the book left at this point, we find out that all of a sudden she has feelings for Charles. There has never been a single indication that she's had feelings for Charles at all. There's been no hint of that whatsoever. She just all of a sudden in her own mind realizes when he's comforting her about what happened at Mrs. Stansby's house that she has feelings for him. And she sits on that for a day. And then she goes back to Charles again, and he tells her that he is in love with her, and he's 40 years old. He's 40 years old. She's 19. He's in love with her. And he's her teacher. That's the other thing. He's her teacher too. This is all very creepy to me. I mean, there were other things to add to the creepiness. I realize that age gap relationships are a thing that do happen in real life, but throughout the whole entire book, he's referring to her as, oh, my dear girl, tut, tut, tut. You know, like through the whole book, he's treating her like she's an ignorant child, but yet he's suddenly in love with her. I just feel like if you're in love with someone, you're not going to see them as a child, which it's very clear that he does. Anyway, that was creepy. And something else I did not mention is that at some point in the book, Mrs. Stansby's niece comes to stay with her. And Mrs. Stansby's niece's name is Janet, and she's 15 or 16 years old. And at some point in the book, that it was even implied that Janet might be a romantic interest for Charles, who is 40 years old. So again, just really creepy. So wasn't a fan of that, but okay. And like there's 20 pages left. So I can't imagine how this book is going to wrap up. So in the last 20 pages, we find out she has feelings for Charles. Charles tells her that he's in love with her. And as he's telling her that he's in love with her, she sees a painting of her friend on his wall, of her dead friend on the wall. She asks him about it, and he explains that this is a girl that he met on the cruise that was uncommonly beautiful, and he just wanted to paint her portrait. She had developed this crush on him, but he told her he didn't return his feelings. Turns out his real first name is actually Nicholas. He was Nikki, the girl that the best friend was in love with and killed herself over. So Lindsay's very upset with this, wants nothing to do with him. She leaves. She decides that she's going to go home. She goes home, spends a few days at home. While she's there, she meets, her brother has come back into town. She meets up with the brother and his new wife, meets the new wife. And then she notices as she's out walking or something, that somebody is at her best friend's house. And her parents are supposed to not be at the home during this time. They have gone off someplace else. And so she goes to the house to investigate, finds out it's Irina. Irina's not dead. Irina's there in the house. She faked her own suicide in order to embarrass her parents, who are really high society, and this would be like a blemish on their reputation. And then she takes off, where she travels around Europe until she meets a much older man with lots of money, marries him, and even though she doesn't love him, he spends all of her money on him. He spends all of his money on her, and so she's happy. So the friend turns out to be kind of brainless, or not brainless, but self-centered and kind of twittish. You know what I mean? Okay, so I am in fact having subconscious memories of this book because Irina, what page am I on? Let me see. Because I'm on page 120 now and Irina has shown up. She is in fact alive. So yeah, I obviously did read this book, and even though I don't actually remember reading it, I'm retaining some subconscious memories of it. So yeah, Irina's alive. So 6 more pages, we'll see what happens. You know what I mean? And so then Irina feels terrible that she has spurned Charles, you know what I mean? And her best friend didn't even care about him in the first place, just used him as an excuse to fake her own death. So then she goes back to Mrs. Stansby's, tells Charles how sorry she is that she spurned him and all this business. And then Charles asks her to marry him, and she says yes. All of these things taking place in 20 pages, and they never even so much as went on a date, nor was there any indication whatsoever that there was a romantic feeling developing between them. So I didn't care for this book. I thought it was ridiculous. I was enjoying the book. Like, I was enjoying the really serene feel of it and the setting, and the sort of interesting characters that were coming along, because the characters were very interesting. But boy, that ending just ruined the entire book for me. Just ruined it. Because the ending included the creepy age gap relationship. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend this book. It was not good, in my opinion, which was a shame because I think it could have been good. And with that, I'll call it the end of the video.